So hello and welcome to episode 3 of Rugby in a Different Light and our post-Lions episode, and what a discussion this is going to be. As usual, you can see we're joined by our 3 experts from different areas of the rugby community. And if you want to hear more about our panel, then tune into previous episodes as their CVs were taking up half the show. So in short, we've got Rachael Burford, ex-England women's player and current Harlequin women's captain. Bruce Aitchison, our super fan really, player, coach, housemaster, rugby announcer. And Owain Jones, our resident journalist who's been writing and editing about rugby since about 2004. But in addition, just to spice things up a bit with some alternate views, we're joined today from South Africa by Nicholas Halsey. Nick played at hooker throughout school and university, attending the University of Pretoria, where he won the Tuks Rugby Championship with Regshuis. Is that how you pronounce that one, Nick?
Regshuis, Afrikaans.
There you go. And he's completed the Rugby World Coaching Level 1, as well as Box Smart, South Africa's system for player head and spinal safety. And this is kind of the important bit, everybody, just to keep us all in check. He studied law at the University of Pretoria, so just keep things legal. And his thesis was titled The Legality of Transformation Policies in Sport, which focus on the quota system in South African rugby. He's currently he's been writing for In the Loose and recently with Rugby Highlights. And he's now decided to launch Rugby Puntit, which at this stage is a rugby blog, but it's primarily focused on South African rugby. It's going to have its own podcast and videos coming soon. So welcome, Nick, and the rest of the team, as always. Thanks. So how's it all been? Are you all happy, excited?
Raring to go, Mark. Can't wait for club rugby to get started again. Forget all this international nonsense and people on hour-long mumps about the referee. It's time to get back into Clubland.
So let's start with a quick thought for everybody on the tour, highlights and lowlights for everybody. Rachael?
I think probably the fact that we got the tour up and running was obviously a big highlight for a lot of people. The opportunity to see players and for the players to travel over to South Africa and to actually get the games underway was important. I think there's been a hell of a lot of distractions during this Lions tour. Predominantly off the pitch, which has then led to things happening on the pitch, which is it's been quite disappointing for me. I think there's a lot of stuff that's been going on in social media. You could talk about the coaching side of things, that second test where, you know, a lot of player behaviour wasn't really acceptable and they all got kind of drawn into all of that. So I guess from that perspective, like that was quite disappointing and probably the low for me.
So Owain, pick up on that a bit. What was your views? Did you think it was was it as good as you thought it was going to be?
I think it's almost impossible to be as good as previous Lions tours, certainly in the professional age, simply because there was no fans. You know, if you'd had 55,000 fans in the Cape Town Stadium on 3 consecutive weekends, it just, you know, with the colour, the atmosphere, you know, the kind of, you know, the camaraderie that is brought together with kind of both sets of fans, it would have made it a very different spectacle. You know, I think everything was focused on the rugby. Look, it's elite test match rugby. They're not always kind of 55, 45, kind of 10 tries to kind of win them. But yeah, just they were hugely missed. I am pleased that the tour went ahead. I mean, Nicholas may be able to fill us in. There was no absolute guarantees that if it was just postponed by 12 months, that the vaccine rollout would have been done in its entirety. So yeah, I'm just glad it's got out of the way. But yeah, it isn't a tour I think people will think of that fondly, certainly on this side of the pond.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, Nick. I mean, you know, from your perspective over there, was it a great tour? But also, it was just brilliant that you actually managed to get it on out there in South Africa. At one point, it looked like, you know, the COVID was going to rip through both squads and there wouldn't actually be any games. But so I think it was quite an amazing achievement, really.
Yeah, I think it was definitely a difficult one to pull off. I mean, it's well documented South Africa struggles with the vaccine and all of that at the moment. But it was a tour that went ahead. As a fan of the game, it was quite difficult to sit less than a handful of kilometers away from Loftus, knowing that the British Irish Lions were here up in Gauteng at first. Then it was moved to Cape Town. And I think it's definitely not the same without the fans. The first Springbok game I've attended was the 2009 decider, the second test. And to now not be able to attend this year was quite a big shock. And I think you can't ever discount, the absence of fans and how that played a role in the outcome. I mean, a Lions team down in the second half of the second test might have rallied had they had their fans in the stadium. I mean, 2009's fans definitely gave the team a massive boost.
And Bruce, finally yourself, what did you make then? I know you want to move on to sort of the rest of the rugby season coming up. We knew you'd be bringing this up.
He didn't listen to anything we just said. He's just got Finn Russell.
No.
Finn Russell.
Yeah, exactly, that's it.
Stop moaning, you people. The highlight was the Scotsman. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it.
Excellent. So Finn's #1 fan. It's always good to have him here on the pod.
The frustration, though, is that I'm not sure what the plan was in game 1 and 2, and Finn comes on after 10 minutes and the whole thing literally gets thrown up in the air, and it looked quite exciting and people enjoyed it, and people have spoken more about his 70 minutes than really they have about any other individual in the entire series, bar none. And that just makes me sad. Now, I know he couldn't feature before that, but surely the game could have been different. The bit I love about Lions tours are the games almost before the test matches, because they throw players together. It looks like it's quite enjoyable. It's an amazing opportunity for those players in the provinces to play against the British and Irish Lions. And there's so many people who no one's ever heard of, but they can say they played against the British and Irish Lions, and I love that. The test matches were disappointing for their quality. They were nervous. It was test match rugby, yada, yada, yada. But when you see somebody like Finn Russell come on and do what he did, that was exciting. And actually it created space for South Africa as well. And that's the game I think most people want to watch. And we might go on to it later. And Burf, I know, was loving the Olympic Sevens. To have had the Olympic Sevens and get a new audience watch that, a simple game, an exciting game. It looked great even without fans. What's the next biggest ticket in town? Let's watch the British and Irish Lions against the Springboks. I'm pretty sure we would have turned off some of those fans that maybe we'd got hold of through the Olympic exposure. But I hope it bodes well for the future. I hope it means that teams are going to try and play some more rugby and understand that there is a bit more to it than sticking the ball at the jumper, kicking it up in the air and just smacking people. There must have been some pretty boring episodes on the video analysis after some of that for a lot of the players.
So Bruce, thanks for that. But one of the things that a lot of people have been saying, and it's been in the press and in a lot of talk as well, it wasn't the most exciting rugby, and we were really hoping for that. And you did say, obviously, when your favourite player Finn came on, things sort of built up a bit and were a bit more exciting. But did you think it was a boring tour, guys? I mean, let's go to Owain.
I think the standard of opposition played before the test just wasn't up to scratch at all, apart from the South Africa A, which was a kind of wolf in sheep's clothing, wasn't it? Really, as the South Africa boys getting a much needed run out. But they folded so easily, didn't they? The kind of provincial sides, compared to what we've seen before. There are reasons for everything, but I think most neutrals would have liked to have seen some better contests played out. I think for the kind of test series, kind of jumping back to that, it just left a bit of a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. I don't think it would have pulled in a lot of new fans like we just talked about with the Olympic Sevens. That's the sort of people who weren't even fans of rugby were saying, wow, there's some absolutely incredible rugby there. I just don't think the British and Irish Lions series did that. I saw very few people outside my rugby bubble who enjoyed it. And again, that would be the shame. It's not, let's not get ahead of ourselves there. It's the end of the Lions. We'll all be excited ahead of Australia 2025. But yeah, at the moment it feels a little bit raw. And I think most rugby lovers will feel a little bit shortchanged by the tour.
And what about you, Rachel? Did you find it could have been a bit more exciting?
I think, Owen's touched on most of the points there, but I think you've also got to remember, it is test rugby and you've got to find a way to win. And sometimes that's done really ugly and really boring. But I do think that the talent from both sides, there's definitely more opportunity to play with more ambition, as opposed to just kind of try and play the field and get yourself into a great position to then maybe win a penalty. Like, that's kind of the mentality that we don't want to have in the game, just to kind of grind things out, win a pen, get 3 points, then repeat what you just did to try. We want to have ambition to play. And there was loads of times where, you know, there was moments of that. So it's not like the players and the teams aren't capable of doing that. And, you know, I think maybe Nicholas, you know, his point around fans not being there, you know, when you're playing and a crowd gets excited about something, it actually makes you get excited, and then maybe make you make that pass, or to go for another step, or whatever it may be. You know, it does have an effect on the atmosphere and the mindset of the players playing on the pitch. So I think, yeah, all in all, it wasn't the best rugby or the most entertaining at times, but, you know, everyone is still a massive Lions fan, and we'll be focusing, you know, and we can't not forget the year leading into this and what it's been like, and the preparation, and the teams haven't had the lead up or the build up. And even in South Africa, the teams playing over there, they haven't had the usual play. So those pre-test games as well, they were unprepared. So I think, you know, all in all, it wasn't the entertainment that we know it can be, but you've got to consider everything that went with it.
And it's almost that the expectation was so much as well, wasn't it? Because it was such a big thing to look forward to. But Nicholas, Nick, it is being a South African, was it more exciting and entertaining if you were on the winning side, you know?
Yeah, I don't know what everyone's talking about. It was very entertaining for us. No, I think from our perspective, obviously we enjoyed the win. I wouldn't say it was the way we wanted to win the series, though. I think for me, the biggest disappointment was to see the Lions sort of drawn into the Springboks style of play. I mean, everyone these days knows what you get from the Springboks. Very physical side. They do look for the penalties. They do like the up and unders. But I thought when the Lions selected their squad, it was going to be one that focused on that attacking rugby. Like you say, Finn Russell coming on was the first time we really saw that. And I thought in the warm-up games, the Lions really did look like a strong attacking side. You know, they were putting high scores on our club teams. Yes, they may have been watered down, but the rugby on display was that sort of attacking rugby we expected to see from the Lions, especially without the likes of CJ Stander and Billy Vunipola and them not making the tour. We expected a running game, and then test 1 came, test 2 came, and it was pretty much the same style from both teams: batter it up, look for the penalty. And I think that's where it sort of fell flat and didn't come to the expectation that everyone had of the tour.
And Bruce, you know, you must have been, from that point where Finn came on, it must have exploded for you.
I think it was just the expectation, though, because everybody was waiting for something to happen, and we'd had 2 tests where no real characters emerged. There was no real moment that people will talk about. That every tour previously, there is a moment, an O'Driscoll or a Bentos or a Monye, or something happened that people remember. I couldn't tell you the scores in any of those games. No idea. I know who won the series, so yes, I get Test rugby has to be about winning, but there were very few moments created that got us up off our seat or are making us think, right, we want to know more. The fans was obviously a difficult thing. I have a bit of an issue with so much of it being on Sky TV, and it was difficult to access, so we struggled to get close to people. Social media has helped that, but because they couldn't get out and about into the communities, we didn't see nice little moments. We didn't see them getting stitched up by going for a swim in the sea and a whole load of girls arrive and all those kind of things where Tommy Bowe has to explain himself. Like those things seem ridiculous, but those are things people remember, and that's probably my sad bit about this. Owain Jones will be remembered because he's an absolute warrior, and how the hell did he get there? Finn will be remembered because he came on and gave us a bit of a glimmer and something to get excited about. But other than that, there aren't too many memories that are going to last. And that, for me, is what keeps the Lions burning. And that's why you can have such a gap from tour to tour, because you're filled up. every 4 years, and it keeps you going, and it means that you can't wait for the next one. Personally, I can't wait for the next one because I think it's needed, and Aussie will be a different story. And the thing with Australia, who knows what the hell they're going to look like in 4 years' time. Whereas South Africa, I could be wrong, but they'll probably look the same for a huge period of time. Whereas Aussie, who knows who the head coach will be, who knows what style they'll be playing. The Lions in those early games did play a bit more rugby, but I think there was more space, so they were able to have an offload and then another one and keep the tempo of the game going because they weren't being denied space the way the Springboks did. I just think we needed some ideas to try and unlock that and create that. And, you know, it's really basic to think they were big lumps of boys, let's move them around and tire them out. But I'm not sure how much input Gregor had to some of that plan in Test 1 and Test 2, and that was the bit, as Nick said, the selection of players got us excited, but the thing that got me excited was Gregor as the coach, because I thought, here we go, here's something that could be different, here's something that could beat the Springboks at their game with our own game. But we got drawn into what seems like a bit of an arm wrestle, and unfortunately the big one tends to win those.
Owen, let's move on to sort of the thing that everybody really, you know, has sort of tried not to talk too much about because it's still ongoing and everything, but we're going to call it Erasmus Gate, you know, all of that kind of TV refereeing. And I mean, really rugby has always stood for referees are kind of looked after in a different way than a lot of other sports. We don't want to go obviously the way that football has gone, but do you think that this could water and filter down into kind of the lower levels of rugby and referees getting a lot more grief now?
It's going to be very hard to kind of map that out to see whether the kind of essentially the kind of one of the world's best coaches really taking umbrage with what a refereeing performance and taking it to social media. How do you kind of quantify how that will kind of seep down the levels? Again, I've met Razi, I've interviewed Razi. He's very charismatic, a very intelligent man. And he quoted Einstein to me, and I don't get many rugby coaches quoting Einstein to me. You know, in a way I could have said before the Razi's rant, that's very easy kind of tabloid little phrase, but that he was almost like a bit like a Jurgen Klopp. He is very charismatic. He does have a real devotion from his players and his fans. And it was kind of strange because within an hour of the game, the first test being played, he thanked everybody for the game and kind of said, looking forward to the next one. And then you have Jacko Johan, this kind of ghost Twitter account coming up, and an hour kind of, you know, pointing out where Nick Berry had kind of gone wrong. It just, yeah, it was just a little bit of it was a strange episode. And if I'm honest, it's hard to kind of, you know, I think probably every South African fan, and Nick might say, well, it was genius. You know, Warren Gatland had called out, well, through the press, he was said to be furious that Marius Jonker had been appointed as a TMO. Obviously, he said he hadn't said that, you know, hadn't come out of his mouth. But yeah, it's very difficult. I remember interviewing Nigel Owens, who said that he makes around 240 decisions just during a test match. That's one decision every 20 seconds. Now, he doesn't blow the whistle every time, but I've refereed kind of under 10s, and that was scrambling my brain. I just think it's the impossible job. And again, we've got the challenge, which I'm sure the guys will talk about, is games were kind of finishing 2 hours, 17 minutes after kickoff. And it's an entertainment sport. So again, rugby can't have it all. Rugby can't challenge absolutely every decision and say it wants quick, fast, free-flowing rugby. It's got to find a balance there somehow.
And Nick, what do you think? How's all that sort of thing come across in South Africa? Is it a very different perspective on it?
You know, I think South Africa still hold on to a lot of what Rassie did for the team in the lead up to the 2019 World Cup and jumped to his defense very quickly. But discussions I've had with a lot of friends, they feel like Rassie's point is valid, but the manner in which it was conveyed and dealt with is probably not the way to have done it. Especially in the light of what Owen said about, you know, after the game, he congratulated everyone, and then it was a sudden change there later on. But I do think, you know, in the game in general, the referees are now heavily under the spotlight because of the advent of the TMO and the role it plays. And I think the referees should you know, be subject to maybe a press conference after the game or something where they are also held partially accountable for what they've done. However, I do think that they do deserve the leeway. Like you said, the amount of decisions they're called on to make, you know, it's an astronomical number, and no one's ever going to get that right. So you have to find the balance in that. But, you know, the main one that stood out for me was the time advantage. I think that was the one that sort of made a point. The rest of it, I think, are decisions that can go either way in any game. And to have done it so publicly, probably not the way to have gone about it. But the repercussions and everything to follow from that are going to play out, I hear, at the end of this month, maybe. And then we'll see how it filters into the game, like you mentioned.
And Bruce, you must have to manage a lot of matches and a lot of refereeing up there. How do you think that came across? Is it something you wanted to see?
No, not at all. And I have a bit of an issue with Sky Sports coverage as well. While I love Nigel Owens, I just feel that added an unwelcome element to it. I found it difficult watching the TV with 12 pundits in the studio and half a dozen pundits on the mics. It was massively overload. What would have happened if that referee had come on and done an hour-long social media post about all the mistakes that the players had done? You know, I would absolutely hate, and apologies, Nick, we've just met, but I totally disagree. I don't think the referees should be subject to a press conference. I think it would just be lambs to the slaughter, because we can pick up, you know, I used to coach with a guy who was absolutely magnificent, and he used to say to the referee, I just need to know if you're looking to blow your whistle or if you're looking to keep the game going, because that at every breakdown there could be a whistle blown. Players off their feet drives me absolutely bonkers. There is no contest for the ball, and that's, if we go back into history, you gathered players together to create space. Why do we have scrums and lineouts to restart the game? Because it gathers players together and it creates space somewhere else. The ruck and the maul gathered players together to create space elsewhere. And because we now don't have a contest for the ball, actually the team in attack is at a disadvantage, because you have the player who's been tackled, the player who's over the top of the ball, possibly one other, and a scrum half. So you have 4 players in a tiny little space on the field, and the defence have committed one tackler and everybody else is on their feet. So actually the attack is at a numerical disadvantage. That makes no sense. That is absolutely bonkers. And I don't know when they're going to be able to address the law and referee it the way it should be to allow the attack the advantage and give the defence a chance to compete for the ball. The way that he analysed was absolutely bang on. He's obviously a very intelligent rugby man. He knows his stuff. I just think there was probably another way to do that, whether it was through a referee manager or, I mean, the Lions could have produced something very, very similar. But I think the point was he needed to play the psychological game, and it seems like he played it brilliantly, because the second test was massively forgettable, other than everybody was able to say, see, Razzie did that and Razzie did that. On the advantage, I totally agree. The penalty advantage seems to be keep going until you score a try, or it just lasts forever. That's definitely something that I think needs to be looked at, and it was really erratic. But I think the referees have a very difficult job, and to keep analysing them and to use the TMO the way we have, making a rugby game last over 2 hours is just nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
And Rachel, from your point of view as a player still, what's it like to be in a match that's going to last 2 hours and all the different sort of breaks in the game? Is it really frustrating as a player?
Well, thankfully, I haven't had too many 2-hour games. I'd definitely have to get a bit of WD-40 on if that was the case. Yeah, but look, the concentration level of it will be really difficult from a player. You know, to go that long is it's gonna test your focus. But yeah, look, I'm with the guys on it. I think, you know, maybe a lot of what Razzie was saying had substance and was valid, but the channel was absolutely the wrong way to go about it. They know the processes that they should do and should use to, you know, to raise those concerns. But I do think, you know, referees really do have to also take accountability, and they do have to analyse their own games. I know they have their own processes and everything, but, you know, there's got to be accountability from everybody. You know, as a player, you're expected to turn up and play and not make as little mistakes. Again, can't have the perfect game, but your aim is always to, and then you go away and you work on that. And, you know, so I do think that there's always got to be a level of accountability from everybody that's playing their part. But yeah, we don't want 2-hour games. We want fast-flowing games with quick decisions made. You know, maybe that's the area that you've got to look into, is the process of how quickly we get the TMO in and how quickly we get them out. You know, you see it in other sports. It's over in a couple of seconds. You know, what can we learn from other sports and bring into our own game?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the Lions wrap up then. We're going to jump now into what's coming up over the next few months, you know, moving up towards Christmas time already, crikey. But United Rugby Championship. I know, Owain, you're excited about this. Bruce, I'm sure you are too. Give us a bit of an overview then, Owain. What's been going on?
Well, as ever, it's mired in a little bit of, you know, uncertainty, because I think it's due to be played weekend of September the 25th. At the moment, there are a few whispers that the South African sides aren't going to be able to get over because South Africa's on a red list. There are suggestions they may be able to play in Italy and then play against the Irish provinces, not Ulster, and then be able to travel to the UK from Ireland, because they're under slightly, again, you start going down a wormhole of government regulations. And again, we're 5 weeks off these sides supposed to be starting. So yeah, basically 16 sides for the top South African provinces, plus the 12 existing sides from from Ireland, Wales, Scotland and Italy. I think there's going to be less games. I think it's going to be 18 games, not 21, not being played during international breaks, which I believe will mean that you should get more sides packed with stars. It should be a good thing. It's just, again, we are mired in this COVID kind of nightmare, potentially for another kind of 6-12 months. But yeah, in 12 months' time, ask me that question, and I think we should have a strong competition.
And Nick, from a South African point of view, why are the South African teams joining with a Northern Hemisphere competition rather than going sort of towards the Southern Hemisphere, which is where it kind of used to be sort of thought of?
You know, from the fans' perspective, I think it's best because now we can braai when the rugby's on in the afternoons. Whereas when it was in New Zealand and Australia, the games were at 7, 8, 9 in the morning. It's a bit early to start the braai then.
High performance analysis, that's the reason. So we can put a braai on.
Well, to be honest, it does sound like it's been done purely for a broadcast point of view, for the kind of the sports rights and putting it on TV.
But I mean, that definitely adds to it. I mean, the timing of the games, you're not going to get guys up, outside of your big rugby fans to watch a game at 7 a.m. Whereas now traveling overseas to you guys, the time difference is very little. The strain on the players in terms of the travel and the fatigue, very different. And, I think it might take a season for the South African fans and the fans outside to get used to the teams and what they stand for, how they play. But I do think it's a great opportunity for the game that, we're now involved up north. I think it's great for South African rugby. I hope you guys feel the same. I'm excited for it. I'm definitely excited to see it.
Are you looking forward to it, Bruce?
I'm looking forward to Owen interviewing Jay-Z.
yeah, right. Two very cool kids there, Bruce.
I can't wait to see what that does. I get to announce it at Edinburgh Rugby Stadium, the new little stadium next to Murrayfield. I can't wait to introduce Jay-Z for the halftime entertainment. I think that's an absolute masterstroke having that company involved. Listen, these things have been so many guises. I don't know, and if you feel that it's just another one in this long road of the last 25 years of trying to come up with a meaningful competition. I think it's still going to rumble on. That the best teams are still going to be the best teams, but what it might do is it gives us something different to look at, because some of the games were pretty stale. You were watching almost international teams when they were at their full Buna. Edinburgh and Glasgow were pretty much Scotland selects against Leinster or Munster or, you know, Treviso. These teams were, and then you watch them again, and the familiarity was just becoming a bit dull. So hopefully it spices that up a bit. I think the idea of fewer games is also good, because we've been through 18 months of just more of the same. I think the fans are excited to get back. I hope season tickets are going like hotcakes for all the teams to try and add a bit of atmosphere, and that'll make it better to watch on TV as well. But I think everybody just wants it back, and everybody wants to get in. There's a lot of excitement up here because the new Edinburgh Stadium, that's what everybody's wanted since it began. While Murrayfield is fantastic, being in the bowl, the atmosphere got lost. So Edinburgh are really looking to do that. Glasgow have been through a strange old time and are now excited to get going. And, you know, it'll be interesting with the Irish and Welsh teams having access to their international players. Surely that's going to make the games better. So, yeah, it's exciting times.
We're going to quickly segue now into the Premiership. And I'm going to start with Rachel here. September the 17th, it all kicks off, doesn't it? So, are you excited? I mean, Saracens are back as well. That's going to be exciting. And then the Ladies' Championship as well, Women's Championship as well.
Yeah, I think looking forward to rugby being back, but also just the fans being back. That opportunity is really exciting. Yep, Saracens back in the league. See what sort of outfit they turn out to be. But yeah, no, really excited, and especially for the Allianz Premier 15 to kick off again. You know, big season for me personally with Harlequins. We want to go back to back. There's no secrets there. But yeah, you know, we saw the back of our season last year, how close games were, and every year it's taken a new level. You know, we're getting to a stage where it's getting 6 and beyond teams that are ultimately competitive, and you can't really write who's going to be in semi-finals and finals come the end of the year, which is what you need for a league, isn't it? You want to have that excitement, and yeah, seeing a lot of sign-ins, re-signings, people leaving, which always adds a little bit of excitement and discussion and a bit of gossip. Bruce loves gossip, so he'd be pleased to see that. Asking, you know, why has Bryony left and to go to Wasps? Now, it's all good, isn't it? That I think what we're seeing now in the women's game is more opportunities across clubs and the chance to go and play for a different club, or clubs coming knocking for you, which is not something that we've had. So yeah, hugely exciting to get the league up and going. Got a few pre-season games coming up. Obviously I'm not going to be playing, but we'll be chief cheerleader on the sideline. But yeah, really looking forward to it getting underway.
And we can't just sort of paper over that crack that you just sort of say, how's the knee? How's it been going?
Yeah, it's going well. So I'm like week 9 now, I think. Yeah, this time I'm a little bit more with it as opposed to the last episode I did. I'm not even sure what I spoke about on that one. But yeah, no, back walking, back on a bike now. So all progressing nicely. And yeah, so hopefully be running, well, kind of jogging in a couple of weeks' time.
And so what do you think, what sort of time scale into the season are you thinking you might be getting back on the pitch again?
So hoping for kind of November, December time will be a nice timeline for me.
Excellent. Well, good luck with that. So let's move over to Bruce then. You must be getting excited about the Premiership and all the other sort of things that are happening coming into sort of local rugby again.
Yeah, I'm keen to see how another Scottish standoff gets on at Gloucester. The chiselled by angels Adam Hastings. He is an absolute Adonis. So it's going to be interesting to see how he goes, and that makes things interesting for Scotland. And some of the signings that teams have made, I'm keen to see how they either fit them all in or if it's going to change some styles and what people have learned from this window. Had a coaches meeting this morning where we were talking about how we think players are going to have viewed the summer of rugby and what that's going to make them think for what they're going to perform like. And, you know, we've got Six Nations and hopefully a back to normal league structure, so players able to put themselves in the window for internationals, and it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. I think the European competitions are going to be really tough this year, and form is going to be interesting going into those European competitions. And there's certain players that I think we're going to be talking about this time next year that maybe are not the headline acts at the moment.
You're talking now just about some of the sort of players, and so are there going to be players that are coming through this year, you know, that we're going to be completely blown away by, that perhaps we haven't heard of yet?
Yeah, I hope so. I think crowds will help that. I think crowds giving youngsters especially that energy and that excitement, and then the social media profile builds, and we start to talk about them. There's a kid up here playing at Glasgow Warriors who's a scrum half, Jamie Doby, who is just absolutely off the chart. The kid is phenomenal, and a very good human. I'm really keen to see what he does. Another Scots heading overseas, Rona Lloyd's going to play in France, which I think is brilliant for her, and will be interesting to see how the Scottish women benefit from that come international time. And they're in camp at the moment, I think, preparing for some qualifiers. So yeah, it's really interesting times, and I think there's lots to be excited about. And while the Lions maybe didn't get us excited, I think what it's done is got us excited for getting back into it again, especially when we're able to go. And I don't get to trot around on the paddock like Burf does, or sit in the journos like the rest of the guys, but being able to hold a microphone and announce to crowds is going to be nice, rather than just annoying the TV people.
And Owain, have you got any new players coming through that you're excited to see this sort of coming season?
Well, I'd like to see Alfie Barbary have a run without injury. He's been pretty unlucky, but he's kind of got this kind of freakish bear type strength that you see almost like once in generation players. He plays at Wasps. They don't know if he's going to be a hooker or a back row player at the moment. Obviously, you had people like Paolo Adogu and Lewis Rees-Sammet kind of broke through in the last kind of 18 months. So it'll be exciting. I thought Cam Redpath looked an absolutely class player. He's got a long-term injury. But yeah, that's the beauty of rugby, isn't it? You're always going to see some stunningly talented players kind of coming through, and in a funny sort of way, rugby kind of goes from World Cups to Lions towards the World Cups. I think, and again, Christ, the amount of column inches devoted to which players. I mean, we haven't mentioned Marcus Smith yet, are going to be filtered into the England setup. Which players are going to be sort of shown the door. As we saw with kind of Chris Robshaw and Dylan Hartley, James Haskell a few years ago. They're going to be all the subplots we're going to be starting to see, because I think, the planning for France 2023 will really kind of kickstart for all international teams from this season.
And Nick, in South Africa, is the Premiership going to make any impact out there? Do you get involved? And I mean, is Sale your sort of team you follow the most with all the South African players out there?
Yeah, I think it's half the Springbok team that side now. But no, I think the Premiership, for the fact that there are quite a number of South Africans playing in it at the moment, does get a fair amount of attention here, especially now that we've relaxed the rules on selecting for the national side from overseas. There is a keen interest. And as Owen mentioned, personally, I'm most keen to see the growth of Marcus Smith. He was a fairly unknown quantity to us here prior to the Lions tour, comes in, gets a start, and he's a player I think England definitely needs to focus on going forward. He was very impressive. So the Premiership definitely is a competition that we're interested in, and even more so now with our migration north for the domestic sides.
And Rach, what are you thinking? Who are the players who are coming through in the women's game that you're excited to be seeing? And presumably you'll get to see a few more games than normal in the next couple of months.
Yeah, well, the thing is, those young players are in the mould. That's the thing. With those ones that are coming through already quite well established in the team. I think what's going to be interesting is playing out around the sevens. So you obviously had the girls who went off to play Team GB. What happens with them next? Are they going to come back into club rugby, or are they going to stay doing the sevens and going on the circuit? Those options for those players. Meg Jones was absolutely outstanding in the Premiership last season while struggling doing sevens, goes to the Olympic Games, has an outstanding tournament. Will she feature back in England? Women 15s have a busy schedule leading into next year. I mean, it's a really exciting year coming up for women's rugby, and for men's rugby with the sevens as well. So you've got Commonwealth, World Cup sevens, and you've got the Women's World Cup. So there's so much to be looking forward to. But yeah, I'll be interested to see where some of those sevens players go, and if they return to the 15 scene, or whether they keep within the sevens program. So that's going to be quite interesting.
Now we're gonna sort of come towards the end of the episode here, but we've got a couple more things coming. But rule changes, there's been a lot of talk on that, and I think perhaps we'll go to Owen first, who can give us a bit of a sort of cover off of the 50-22 rules, goal line dropouts coming, a whole bunch of stuff. Owen, what's happening?
I'll just say I'm dreadful for kind of rules and regulations.
That's why I came to you first, Owen. I thought you could mess it all up and Bruce could pick it up for us.
It was Tom Wood that told me that they're just lots of grown men and women running around after a ball. That's kind of how I like to see my rugby. You know, I'm not somebody who kind of obsesses over rules. But yeah, from my understanding, kind of 50-22 is you need to kick the ball in your own half. It needs to bounce at least once in the opposition's 22. Then the attacking team gets the throw in rather than the defending team. So what it could force teams to do is to make sure there are one or two drop out of the kind of front line, kind of blitz defense, and they may be leaving gaps for, you know, more offensive play, more popping people into holes, because one or two players have to cover that backfield, because, you know, could make a difference. Over to you, Bruce, for the goal line dropout explanation.
I'm not entirely convinced that these are massively going to impact the shape of the game. That's my concern with them. It seems like a bit of tinkering. The 50-22, there's already almost 4 players in the backfield, especially when you watch teams that you know are going to box kick. You've got at least one back rower plus your back 3, knowing that the ball's not going to go wide to where you might be down defenders. So yes, they'll be interested to see how they go. It might mean that there has to be a bit more focus on kicking. It'll be interesting to know if Burf's got her kicking boots on, because I think it might have to come from a little bit wider out than necessarily the 9 or the 10. So it might be that we see players a bit wider out, putting the boot to ball a bit more. But where do we want to see the thing tidied up around the breakdown? Scrum, I saw somebody else, I can't remember who it was, but they tweeted to Nigel Owens talking about the feed at the scrum during the tests, and there was one where it was hilarious. It just got thrown right to the number 8's feet. Now already that's changed because it goes on the shoulder rather than down the middle, and you know the number of against the head scrums now are, it's only a penalty, it's not a hook. So that ship's already sailed. But those are things that the ball down the middle of the line out, the ball down the middle of the scrum, those are things people actually want to see. I think we all remember the days of hookers having a go at the opposition ball, because maybe Burf's not old enough, but the rest of us are old enough to remember having a pop at the opposition ball. Those were brilliant things. Those were skills. Those were moments you had to choose. And a hooker, that was like a hooker scoring a try, taking the ball against the head 5 meters from their own line, or, you know, those were great moments. These laws, they'll probably confuse the people in the crowd for a while, and until we get to post-Christmas, and then it'll just be what happens again. I did hear a couple of issues with referees who weren't too sure of them yet, so I'm glad there's quite a long run-in to meaningful games through pre-season, so that everybody can get up to speed. Otherwise, Razzie's going to go bonkers with his YouTube clips during the week.
2-hour video.
Yeah. And Rachel, do you think it's going to be something that is going to make a massive difference? I mean, Jeremy Guscott's been seen as saying, you know, he just wants, like Bruce, the scrum sorting out, the sort of, you know, the rucks and the mauls and all that sort of stuff. But here we are putting in these kind of kicking changes and things. Do you think it's going to make a big difference?
I think it could, but I think it's going to take time. It's going to take time to have material effect, especially, you know, in the women's game. It's not notorious for putting boot to ball, and you might not see any change there because, you know, a lot of people would argue that the women's game is a lot more free flowing. We run with the ball a lot more, offload a lot more. And that's just down to the ability to be able to kick the ball further enough or not, or to be kind of tactically aware of how to position the ball. There's very few that can do that. So I think it could have an effect, but I don't think we're going to see anything immediate. I think even in the closed trials, there was very little of these instances even happening. I think, you know, around the in-goal dropout could be interesting. It's obviously going to, you know, I didn't actually realise that if you go for a crossfield kick and you catch and jot it down, then that's a goal dropout, or if you grub a through. So you could see teams not going for those kind of kicks overs or kicks throughs because of the nature of it being a turnover. I think, yeah, they're clear and obvious things like putting the ball in straight and line out or scrum. It's so clear and obvious to fans watching, isn't it? So like, let's get those things right, and they're not hard to referee and to say no, not straight. Yeah, breakdown's always going to be messy. I think whatever laws you put in place, it's always going to be tricky and difficult. I like the latching law, where the latcher has to stay on their feet. I think that actually allows for the contest over the ball. And I think that would then make potentially more creativity in the 22, as opposed to just pick and go, because then if you are held up, you've also lost, you don't get another shot. So I think that could be something that you could see open up a bit more in terms of creativity about how teams are going to try and play in that area. But yeah, I think it will take a bit of time for these laws to actually come into the game.
The other place that might have an impact is when there's 90 seconds to go on the clock and my team's winning. Yeah. And you have two players latching on. They don't have to stay on their feet, and you might as well get chips and go home, because you know what's going to happen, unless you have that oh my goodness moment where the referee does blow the whistle for players coming off their feet and all of a sudden. But it's a brave referee to blow that whistle at that point, when it's been ignored for 79.5 minutes or 2.5 hours, depending on if it's a test match. And that close of the game, it's a bit like basketball with a minute to go and the score's 119 to 100. You know who's won, and it just becomes a bit of a farce. Not being able to keep playing to the final whistle is a real frustration for me. But I totally get Burf's point that the bit in the 22, yeah, it might bring a bit more creativity there, which would be very welcome.
And Nick, what about over in South Africa? How's the sort of rule changes been sort of favoured there? Is it looked on well, or is people sort of a bit, what's going on?
So our first taste of the rule changes came this past Saturday with the Rugby Championship kicking off. You know, it was now applied with the Australia-New Zealand game, and then later in the day, the South Africa-Argentina game. And there'd been quite a bit of talk about the fact, you know, the Springbok backline was completely different. Maybe Rassie and Jacques Nienaber had been training this backline on the new laws, that we would see that sort of variation in the kicking strategy. And to be honest, after watching both games on Saturday, I didn't see much of this being, you know, used or put to use. There was only one instance where we saw Frans Steyn actually get the ball out and get the line out for the Springboks, and that was only after the TMO then reviewed that it hadn't, you know, it had gone into touch. So other than that, I don't think it's had much of an impact on the game. But as Rachael said, you know, after time and as players adapt, that might be the case. But generally, I also agree the breakdown is where we should focus. The other rules are, you know, superfluous. They don't bring about the change that the fans really want to see in the game.
Here's a brilliant stat. Murray Kinsella on Twitter. The ball in play time for the Springboks against the Lions, 26 minutes and 22 seconds. Yeah, it took 2 and a bit hours for the game to happen. I mean, that's not what people are paying for. And Burf's point about not being so much kicking in the women's game, I don't have a stat for it, but the women's game ball in play time is unreal. It's so good because, like, the continuity keeps going, the ball's in play, it's worth watching. To only turn up for 26 and a bit minutes in 2 hours of supposed entertainment, that's a tough sell to new markets that Jay-Z might be trying to introduce us to.
American football, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit, and in that 26 minutes, how much action did we genuinely see that wasn't ball up the jumper or ball on the deck and people piled up and then we do it again with, yeah, it's a tough sell. And, you know, coming back to the Olympic sevens, I mean, how good was it? And Burf's talking about some of the names there. What are they going to do next? Those were moments created in this summer for me. I don't have many, you know, Bentos in 97 Lions is everybody's favourite because of what he did on the field, not necessarily the nonsense off the field, but what he did on the field. For me, that the women's seven was just phenomenal. What a team to support. And then the men's team, maybe not household names, but the way they went about their business was superb. And then to watch the other teams and how games went right down to the wire, that was exciting. Those were moments that I was willing to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning for. I'm not sure I would have set the alarm for that second Springboks Lions test. And you know, players like Meg Jones, she was phenomenal. She was absolutely magnificent. Jazz Joyce, lightning quick. That's her and Lewis Rees-Zammit. I mean, those are players to get you up off your seat. We didn't get to see him play for the Lions, but I got to see Jazz Joyce play for the Sevens. That was worth watching. I absolutely loved watching the Olympic Sevens. And I think people who didn't know much about rugby loved watching the Olympic Sevens. So you can see why that game is growing in popularity, because it's easy to understand and it's exciting to watch.
Absolutely. Well, we're kind of coming to the end now, but we've got one little tiny thing just to kind of wrap on. That was the captain's picks. You know, over the first 2 episodes, we were loads of things going on with the captain's pick. But actually, when you look at it now, written down in black and white, I mean, to be honest, Rachel, you completely got away with it. You were right all the way with Owain Jones. We were laughing at you when he got injured, but like some superhero, he dragged himself up, played, was the captain. You're absolutely safe there. Now, Bruce, I think, to be honest, you too, because you went with Hoggy.
No, I went with Hoggy.
Did you go with Hoggy?
I went with Hoggy, yeah.
So you went Hoggy.
I've been confused for Darragh O'Brien, grew from Despicable Me, but never for Rachael Burford. So I'm claiming that one. I'm loving that.
First. So you went with Hoggy, Rachel, right? So
I
you went with
Hoggy.
So that and he captained a game, so that's fine.
A few games.
Yeah. And Bruce, you went with Alan Wynne, didn't you?
Yeah, because Owen got stitched up and he got last pick, I think.
And Owen went with Maro Itoje. So actually, out of the whole of the tour, in the end, the captain's picks, Owen was the only one who didn't manage to pick a captain.
Who's player of the series then for the Lions?
We didn't do that though.
We didn't.
Can't claim that.
Exactly.
Owen.
You can't suddenly jump onto a different game.
I'm going early with saying he'll be captain in 2025. So I've gone early with that.
No,
maybe we'll do that next.
I've got that.
Oh.
So there we go. So it's Owen who's going to have to have.
I need to get my sign out again.
Owen's going to have a Scotland and an England ball in the background for the next pod. So that's.
I thought he had to wear a shirt to the next press conference.
I think that's probably something as well. We'll see if we can get that arranged. So listen, guys, thank you so much for joining us again. Really appreciate it. Nick, thanks for your first time on the pod. Hope you've enjoyed being here and some great views there as well. And hopefully we'll see you all on the next one.